Hey folks, welcome back to Forgotten Battles of World War II, where we uncover the wild, underrated clashes that shaped the war. Today, we're heading to the scorching sands of North Africa for a story of epic underestimation. How British generals laughed off Italian tin cans until those supposedly weak tanks unleashed chaos in the desert. Yeah, you heard that right. The Brits thought the Italian army was a joke, with their flimsy M1340 tanks looking like something out of a scrapyard. But boy, did things flip in the North African campaign from 1940 to 1943. This forgotten theater pitted Mussolini's forces against the British Commonwealth, with Rommel's Afrika Korps jumping in later, turning it into a roller coaster of tank battles under the blazing sun. Let's dive in and see how arrogance almost cost the Allies big time. Picture this. It's June 1940. Italy declares war on Britain and France, eager to grab some empire in Africa. The Italians have a huge army in Libya, over 200,000 troops, hundreds of those M1340 tanks, which were light, fast, but thinly armored, earning the nickname tin cans from mocking British officers. British generals like Wavell were smirking, calling them mobile coffins because their 47mm guns couldn't punch through heavier British armor like the Matilda II, and their riveted plates popped open like cans under fire. Early on, the Brits were right. In Operation Compass starting December 1940, a small British force of about 36,000 absolutely demolished the Italians, capturing 130,000 prisoners and destroying or nabbing over 400 tanks while losing just a fraction. It was a rout. Italian positions crumbled in places like Beta Fam, where British Matildas waded through machine gun fire unscathed, their thick armor shrugging off Italian shells like rain. The M1340s tried to fight back, but often broke down in the desert heat. Engines overheating, tracks snapping on rocky terrain, total chaos for the Axis. Mussolini was humiliated, and Hitler had to bail him out by sending Erwin Rommel and the Afrika Korps in February 1941. Now here's where the twist kicks in. The Italians weren't done yet, and those weak tanks started causing real headaches when teamed with German tactics. Rommel, the Desert Fox, arrived with superior Panzer IIIs and IVs, but he integrated the Italian forces smartly, using their lighter M1340s for reconnaissance and flanking maneuvers in the vast open deserts. Suddenly, the Brits weren't laughing. In Operation Sonnenblume, Rommel's combined Axis force pushed back the overextended British lines all the way to Egypt, recapturing Tobruk and turning the tide. Those Italian tin cans, dismissed as junk, proved deadly in hit-and-run raids, swarming British supply convoys and outmaneuvering slower Matildas in the sand dunes. One crazy story from the Siege of Tobruk: Italian Bersaglieri infantry, supported by M1340s, launched daring night assaults, their tanks' speed allowing them to dodge artillery and close in fast, lobbing shells into British positions and creating panic. British diaries talk about how they underestimated the Italians' grit. Sure, the tanks were weak one-on-one, but in packs, under Rommel's command, they disrupted logistics, forcing retreats and stretching British resources thin. The desert was unforgiving. Sandstorms blinded everyone, water was scarce, and those M1340s, despite breakdowns, kept coming, their crews fighting fiercely out of national pride after early humiliations. By mid-1941, the campaign seesawed. Battles like Operation Battleaxe, where Brits tried to relieve Tobruk, but got hammered by Axis anti-tank guns and those pesky Italian tanks in ambushes. Rommel praised the Italian divisions for holding lines that allowed his panzers to strike, saying they were brave but badly equipped. But the chaos they caused? Massive. British convoys raided, airfields threatened, and the Suez Canal in danger. Enter Bernard Montgomery in 1942, the Brit who turned it around at El Alamein. But before that, the Italians had the upper hand in spots. At the First Battle of El Alamein in July 1942, Italian Ariete Division's M1340s charged British positions head-on, taking heavy losses but buying time for Rommel to regroup, their sacrifice halting the Axis advance just short of Alexandria. It was brutal. Tanks brewing up in flames, crews bailing into machine gun fire, sand turning red under the relentless sun. The Brits had to respect them now. No more jokes about tin cans. These weak machines were part of a force that nearly kicked the Allies out of Africa. But Monty wasn't having it. He built up forces, introduced better tanks, like the Sherman with its 75mm gun, and at the Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942, the tide fully turned. British artillery pounded Axis lines for hours, then infantry and armor advanced, with upgraded Matildas and new Grants smashing through. The Italian M1340s fought valiantly, but were outgunned. Shells pierced their thin armor easily, turning them into scrap heaps amid minefields and barbed wire. One epic clash, the Ariete Division held off waves of British tanks for days, radioing, "We are surrounded, we are attacking," before being overrun, their chaos-making days over. This battle broke the Afrika Korps's back, leading to Axis retreat across Libya and eventual surrender in Tunisia in 1943. Why is this forgotten? The spotlight's on Rommel's genius or Monty's victory, but the Italian role, from laughingstock to chaos creators, shows how underdogs can punch above their weight with smart allies. The North African campaign wasn't just tanks, it was about supply lines too. The Brits controlled the seas, starving Axis fuel, while Malta-based subs torpedoed Italian convoys. Rommel complained about shortages, but Italian engineers kept those M1340s running on fumes, improvising repairs in the desert.
Partisan-like Bedouin tribes added to the mix, scouting for both sides. But the real heroes were the tank crews baking in 50-degree heat, fighting mirages and dysentery. So what flipped the script? Italian resilience or German leadership? Stick around as we dig deeper into specific battles like Gazala or Crusader, where those tin cans really shone before the fall. First up, the Battle of Gazala in May-June 1942. This was Rommel at his peak, and the Italian tanks played a starring role in the chaos. The Brits, under Ritchie, had dug in along the Gazala line, a fortified stretch from the coast to Bir Hakeim, with minefields, anti-tank guns, and their heavy Grant and Stuart tanks ready to roll. Rommel's plan was bold: feint north with Italians to distract, then hook south with his panzers through the desert. But here's the underrated part. The Italian Trieste and Ariete divisions, with their M1340s and newer M1441s, still thin-skinned but improved, were crucial in the feint and follow-up. The Brits laughed, expecting easy pickings, but the Italians charged into the fray, their light tanks zipping around slower British armor, hitting flanks and supply dumps. At Knightsbridge, a key box position, Italian tanks swarmed British Grants, using speed to dodge and close for kills. Sure, many brewed up, but they tied down forces, allowing Rommel's 88mm guns to shred the heavies.
Chaos ensued. Sandstorms hid movements, radio intercepts confused commands, and those tin cans caused havoc by raiding behind lines, capturing fuel and ammo that kept the Axis rolling. British losses mounted. Over 1,000 tanks destroyed or captured in the campaign, with Italians claiming a chunk despite their weaknesses. Rommel even wired Mussolini praising to Ariete for heroic stands. The fall of Tobruk in June was the pinnacle. 35,000 Brits surrendered, a massive blow, and Italian tanks led the final assault, breaching wire and overwhelming defenses in a dust-choked melee. But the Brits learned fast. Monty took over, emphasizing combined arms and overwhelming firepower. Now let's talk Operation Crusader in late 1941, another seesaw where Italian tanks shone before fading. After Rommel's initial push, the Brits launched Crusader to relieve Tobruk, with new Crusader tanks, ironically named, facing off against Axis forces. The Italians, licking wounds from Compass, regrouped under better officers, their M1340s used in defensive ambushes around Sidi Rezegeg. British generals still mocked. One report called Italian armor pathetic, but in the Sunday of the Dead battle, Italian tanks and artillery mauled advancing British columns, turning the airfield into a graveyard of burning wrecks. The chaos was total. Tanks dueling at point blank in wadis, dust clouds blinding gunners, and Italian Semovente assault guns, based on M13 chassis, proving deadly with 75mm howitzers, knocking out Matildas that shrugged off smaller shells. Rommel counterattacked, using Italian divisions to hold flanks while panzers dashed to the wire, nearly cutting off the 8th Army. It was touch and go. Brits lost 800 tanks, Axis about 300, but Tobruk was relieved temporarily. The Italians' resilience forced the Brits to respect them. No more easy laughs. Fast forward to El Alamein, the endgame. In the first battle, Italian infantry and tanks dug in deep, their M1340s in hull-down positions, sniping at advancing Brits and buying precious time. At Ruissaut Ridge, they repelled charges, their cannons barking in the night, creating confusion that stalled Monty's probes. But by the second battle, overwhelming Allied superiority, 1,000 tanks versus 500 Axis, endless artillery, overwhelmed them.
Monty's supercharge broke through, with Sherman's vaporizing Italian armor in droves, the Ariete's last stand a tragic highlight as they fought to the last shell. The retreat became a rout, with Axis forces streaming back to Tunisia, where they surrendered in May 1943, ending the African campaign. This whole saga taught harsh lessons. Never underestimate an enemy based on gear alone. Tactics, terrain, and morale matter. The desert favored mobility, and those Italian tin cans, laughed at as weak, created enough chaos to prolong the war in Africa by years, costing lives and resources. If the Brits had crushed them early without Rommel, maybe D-Day happened sooner. So, what's your take? Were the Italians underrated heroes or just lucky sidekicks? Drop a comment below, like if this blew your mind, subscribe for more WWII deep dives, and share with your history buffs. Thanks for watching Forgotten Battles of WWII. See you in the sand next time. Peace out.